Hello class! Okay, today we are going to be talking about Nathaniel Hawthorne's short story, The Birthmark. And this short story is not in your Broadview Anthology of Short Fiction. This one is only available online, so make sure you find a copy of that story. The Birthmark was written by Nathaniel Hawthorne, and it was written in the year 1843. So I'll tell you a little bit about our author. So we are studying Nathaniel Hawthorne, who was born in 1804 in Salem, Massachusetts. He's sort of well known for being a critic of the Puritanism of that community where he grew up in Salem, Massachusetts. And actually his ancestor was John Hawthorne, who was a judge at the Salem witch trials. So Nathaniel Hawthorne was often sort of preoccupied with ideas of confronting his past and looking at the hypocrisy and corruption of his ancestors who lived in this Puritan community, a very religious community that were again responsible for the Salem witch trials, in which mostly women, were accused of being witches, and then they would be hanged or burned at the stake, just based on sort of speculation and rumor and gossip. So this was a sort of sore spots in Hawthorne's past, his ancestry, and he felt that in his writing he could sort of confront some of the hypocrisy and corruption that took place within his ancestors' history. So Hawthorne is well known for writing very sort of moral stories or moral allegories. His themes are often confronting, again, what he sees as a sort of inherent evil or sin of humanity. So he likes to confront sort of the dark parts of human nature and what he sees as sort of rooted in the dark side of our sense of self. And in terms of genre, Hawthorne's writing can be sort of linked to the Romantic movement and particularly Gothic literature. I see a lot of connections between the story we're doing today and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which if you've read that, you can definitely see some parallels in both of these stories. But Gothic horror, Gothic literature, we could also study Edgar Allan Poe. But again, a lot of those dark themes, very sort of dark atmosphere. The tone is often sort of disturbing. These are some of the characteristics of Gothic literature. Okay, so if we look more closely at the historical context of the Birthmark, we get a little bit more insight into what Hawthorne was sort of addressing in terms of his society. And in this story, even though it was written in 1843, he's sort of talking about a time gone by. And in particular, he's talking about the scientific revolution as being this period where men like Almer, our main character, studied every single part of the natural world and were really attempting to understand and control nature. So a man like Almer, this man of science, he would have been called a natural philosopher. So the word scientist wasn't actually coined until 1834. Until this point, we just had sort of the study of the natural world, and there was no sort of one catch-all term to call all of the sort of scientific enterprises that were going on. So natural philosophy, natural philosophers, these were the terms that were used to describe these men of science who, again, wanted to study and control the forces of nature. So they studied all the workings of nature, how life begins, how it ends, and they looked at natural phenomenon and tried to sort of understand it. And in the story, Almer is what we would call an alchemist, or he studies alchemy, which is kind of like an older version of chemistry. And in alchemy, the goal was again to sort of elevate anything that was sort of existence, the material world, and then take it to the next higher level. So try to create perfection out of the material world. For instance, this is sort of turning coal into gold. So you're elevating something base, material of the earth, and then you're taking it to its perfect form. So we get Almer applying these ideas of alchemy onto his wife in this story, Georgiana, who has this birthmark on her face, and he attempts to transform his wife into this ideal perfection and achieve perfection with the materials of the earth. So the goals of alchemists were again to liberate parts of the cosmos from temporal existence and achieve perfection. So to do that, they had to they were in search of immortality, and you'll hear there'll be some references to scientists or natural philosophers in the story itself, and they'll talk about the goal of natural philosophers to find the elixir of life, or elixir vitae, which would again, if you found this magical liquid, would allow you to become immortal. So we know such things don't exist nowadays, but again, at this time, there were so many mysteries of the natural world, of the earth, that were unknown, that again, there was a lot of sort of speculation of what man could do if he controlled the earth or the nature through his science. And there are some other sort of scientists or natural philosophers mentioned in the book. So philosophers of the Middle Ages, such as Albertus Magnus, Cornelius Agrippa, Paracelsus. So he mentions a couple of other sort of ancient natural philosophers who he looks up to. So Almer has this legacy of natural philosophers who he's sort of following from, and he's trying to build on the science of the past and achieve new discoveries through his sort of laboratory. So in these illustrations here, you can see at the time that Hawthorne was writing, so in this picture there's sort of an illustration of the day and age in which Hawthorne could be writing. There was the Industrial Revolution was going on, so a lot of new discoveries in regards to the technology at the time, so steam engines, factories, etc. So his story sort of takes place in the past, but he's also sort of commenting on the nature of human progress and how man is constantly striving to achieve more and more and perfect on the natural world through sort of aggressive means to progress and add new technology, new scientific knowledge, and improve upon nature. And then in the second illustration, we have a sort of archetypal or classic laboratory scene where you would have the sort of mad scientist and his assistant, sort of, I think of Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein's laboratory in film or TV. We get that sort of scene, similar scene in the Birthmark, where Almer has his assistant Aminadab, and they're in this laboratory full of all these sort of beakers, and there's a fire, and everything is going on behind the scenes. So it's a classic or archetypal laboratory scene that we get in the Birthmark. So Hawthorne also uses allegory. This is a literary device that can be found in his work. And allegory, again, if we think of the definition, it is a literary device used to convey symbolic or hidden meaning through characters or events. I like to sort of say that it's kind of like a parallel story almost, or a hidden story, where you have sort of levels of meaning that can sort of be peeled away from the text. So on a surface level, you would have your characters and the plot structure, but on an allegorical or metaphorical level, these characters also stand for certain ideas, and they're archetypal, or they have a strong type or idea associated with them. Often you can sort of find allegory in popular film or TV. I'm sure some of you have probably read George Orwell's Animal Farm. So in that text we have an example of uh, the surface level being animals, on farm animals, take over their farmer's land and kick him out, and then the animals are talking and interacting with one another like humans. And then on the allegorical level, these farm animals are a representation of the communist revolution, and each sort of animal character has a sort of historical figure that it is a sort of allegory for. So uh, it's a text or a piece of literature that has multiple levels: a surface level where it's just about the plot and characters, and then an allegorical level which you can sort of read in allusions to history, real figures, or ideas being represented through each of the characters. Other examples that I have here, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The one that's most prominent in that one would be sort of a religious allegory where you have Aslan, the lion, who sacrifices himself and dies, and then there's this rebirth scene. So that story has often been read as sort of a religious allegory, with Aslan becoming a kind of Jesus figure. And then the last example I have here is just popular science fiction films are a good place to sort of understand allegory. The example of District 9 or Avatar. District 9 uses the sort of setting of South Africa and comments on apartheid, but it uses aliens as a way to convey the racism and separation of apartheid in South Africa. So it sort of has this political or historical allegorical level, but it's using aliens as a way to convey this message. Avatar is the same, so they are also using an alien planet as a way to sort of think about the history of colonialism. So in the Birthmark, we do get the level of allegory being sort of played out in regards to a sort of moral level. So we have morals, an ethical story being told. So there will be a moral or lesson to the Birthmark. And again, the characters are representing ideas. They're sort of archetypal characters. And again, there's sort of levels that we can read into Hawthorne's story. So if once you've read the story, you can also participate in your groups by completing the character chart template in your note-taking section for the wiki pages, and again contribute to these wiki pages and get some marks and interact with your classmates this way. So what I'm asking you guys to do is again to complete the wiki page by adding information about each of the main characters. So look for the physical descriptions of each of the characters: Elmer, Georgiana, and Aminadab. Look for some of their strengths and weaknesses. So what are their virtues? What are their flaws? You can think of any sort of defining moments or defining quotes that sort of capture their character. And then think of any central symbols or descriptions that again would allow you to read into this character. So what is this character about? What are the ideas being represented through this character? And start thinking about the characters as sort of almost a representation of certain ideas or virtues, beliefs.